and a very, very good afternoon, good morning, or a good evening, depending on which part of the world you're checking in from. I hope you're all having a fantastic day so far. Thank you so much for taking time to be part of today's webinar. Before we jump into today's session, I would like to do a very quick audio and video check. So if you can hear me loud and clear, and if you have no issues in viewing the screen, please drop in a yes message in the chat box provided. Thank you so much. Thank you for your confirmations. A very quick disclaimer before we get into today's session. I am working remotely. I'm checking in from home, and you know how the home network can be once in a while. So in case there are any audio or video glitches, in case there are discrepancies, please keep me notified by dropping a message in the chat box. With Zoom, I unfortunately do not have an audience view, so I wouldn't know if the broadcast is seamless unless you notify me. So thank you so much in advance for that. And yes, today we will be talking about cybersecurity predictions for 2021 and beyond. I am Sharada Murthy. I work with the marketing team of ManageEngine. I'm a technical expert, and today I am going to be your presenter. I also want to very quickly get you used to the tool that you're working with. If you have any questions that you'd like to shoot at me, please make use of the Q&A tab that you see. You will be able to, I will be able to receive your questions while I'm broadcasting the session. Also take time to answer the questions live. And if you want to drop me a message, share some tips and tricks, best practices, or simply drop an answer for the questions I'm asking, you can make use of the chat console. I will be able to read your messages from the chat console as well. All right. With that, very quickly, we are going to dive into the cybersecurity predictions for 2021. This session might be a lot of information in a very short span of time. It's a 45-minute session, and it's going to be a lot of reports, a lot of surveys, and basically a lot of information. So I also want to quickly remind you that this session is being recorded and is being recorded live. You will also receive a copy of the slide deck along with the video recording once we wrap up today's session and we are able to process the raw edits. So I just want to quickly put that across as well. With that, let's look at the agenda for the day. I have tweaked things a bit, pardon me, and reordered these sessions. So we will be starting with talking about how remote work will evolve and affect the cybersecurity threat landscape. We are going to talk about how remote work has been since 2020 and how things have changed in the last couple of months, more specifically 1 year, with the onset of COVID, and also how ransomware has evolved from a business risk to a raging national security. We will look at examples supporting this and also talk about what we can do as an organization on an organizational level to safeguard the security posture of our organization and eventually safeguard data, safeguard user identities, and also work towards trying to identify the top 5 cybersecurity predictions for 2021, see the effects it's going to have on an organizational level for us, and also work on improving at the end of the day, the security posture of our organizations. And I'm also going to quickly walk you through how deploying a consolidated identity and access management solution will decrease your organization's attack surface and more. All right. Once again, if you do have any questions, if you want me to talk about a particular module, please feel free to do so. But before we jump into the session plan for the day, I want to quickly launch the poll to try and identify the audience who joined us today. So we have ManageEngine Self-Service Plus, which is our in-house password self-service and single sign-on solution. It also offers multi-factor authentication. I want to try and understand how many of you here are existing customers of AD Self-Service Plus, and how many of you are currently looking at the solution, evaluating the solution. If the answer is neither, I would definitely recommend you to skip the poll. This will help me go further into today's session and also talk about how you can make the best use of the application if most of you are evaluating the solution. So please take a couple of seconds to answer the poll that you see on the screen. All right, perfect. Thank you so much. I'm going to quickly end the poll for the day. But yes, like I mentioned, we will be talking about the cybersecurity landscape or the cybersecurity predictions for 2021 on a global level, because it's important to be multiple steps ahead of a potential cybersecurity attack. And the best way to approach it is to try and understand what's happening on a global scale, because trust me when I say this, if a neighboring organization or a neighboring country has been susceptible to a certain style of cybersecurity attack or has been susceptible to an attack at all, you might be next. And this is the motivator to try and identify what kind of cyber attacks are doing the rounds, what are the kind of cyber intrusions that have happened across the globe, and try to make sure that we have the right security measures taken on an organizational level. And that is what today's session is also going to be about. How remote work will evolve after the cybersecurity threat landscape. I'm sorry, how remote work will evolve and affect the cybersecurity threat landscape, more specifically after the onset of COVID, right? So I'm going to do a little throwback to the first half of 2020 to give you numbers. And a lot of today's information is going to be, like I said, reports and numbers, giving you a reality check on what's happening around us, right? With the onset of COVID, with the onset of remote working, and this was on a global level after February, right? We saw a spike in cybersecurity intrusions, and these were the recorded intrusions in comparison with 2019. All of 2019 put together, the recorded intrusions were 35,000, but just the first half of 2020 recorded more than 40,000 intrusions. And this is alarming. But we also know for a fact that this is what mass remote working brought along. So if we try to break into the numbers that you see on the screen and try and analyze why there was a sudden spike in cybersecurity attacks with the onset of COVID, is definitely the fact that we on a global level, we're not prepared for mass remote working. Please correct me if I'm wrong. I want to try and also identify how things were in your organization. So please feel free to drop in your suggestions, drop in your messages, comments. You can share your ideas with me with the help of the chat console, and I would be happy to read out your messages with the panel who have joined us today. But interestingly, with very many administrators that I've had the privilege of talking to, all right, there are also reports that state this, but we were not ready to, tackle remote working, because until then we were all safe and happy within the firewalls of our secure organization. But with the onset of COVID, with mass remote working on a global level, we had to work from, public networks, private networks, networks that were not protected by firewalls, networks that were more susceptible to cybersecurity attacks, making remote workers the easiest targets for cyber intrusions. And secondly, the most important fact was that since we were not ready with the right security measures in place for mass remote working, we also did not have the vulnerabilities when it comes to remote desktops, or the vulnerabilities when it comes to, the vulnerabilities when it comes to the VPN applications or solutions that we make use of. They were not up to date, right? And if you notice, there was also a trend of a lot of new patches being released between February to May 2020 by a lot of VPN vendors across the globe, trying to rectify their vulnerabilities, trying to rectify and patch these vulnerabilities before it was too late. But then if you also notice, most of these cyber attacks that happened in the first half of 2020, more specifically after the onset of COVID, after the onset of remote working, targeted remote desktop machines, and definitely VPN servers as well, VPN connections as well. They exploited the vulnerabilities available. And that is also something we will be talking about today. I'm going to try and give you the solutions to all that we are discussing today in terms of, the problems that we faced as a global audience. So coming back to the slide that talks about how remote work will evolve and affect the cybersecurity threat landscape, pardon me. The important point to note here is that remote work is going to continue through 2021, most part of 2021, depending on which part of the world you're checking in from. But there have been positive response for remote working across the globe, and it's expected to even continue after the world gets to a better place, after the pandemic settles in as well. Which brings us to another important aspect of remote working, which is to try and beef up the networks from which users log in, identify these networks, protect these networks, even if they are home networks, even if they are public networks, try and safeguard these remote desktop logons and access as well, monitor them, and definitely work towards protecting or having good patching in place to safeguard the VPN solutions as well, and ensure that the right person has right access, thereby working towards improving the cybersecurity threat landscape. But that said, once again, coming back to this interesting report by CrowdStrike, if you try and break down why this happened or why the drastic spike in 2020, it also very interestingly points out to another reason, which is ransomware available as a service. Yes, you heard me right. Ransomware is now available as a service, which also means that cloud applications will also be targeted, all right? Cloud applications will be easy targets with ransomware now available as a service. Hybrid infrastructure will not be safe or secure, will also be susceptible to these attacks. And at the end of the day, we have to come to terms with the fact that on an organizational level, no matter what our infrastructure is, if we are completely on premises, completely on the cloud, or if we work on a hybrid environment, if we work with a hybrid cloud setup, it's important for us to take the bare minimum security measures to ensure that our organization is secure. And that is what the answer to the previous report is all about. For organizations, no matter what part of the world you're checking in from, the best defense that you can do is pay attention to basics. I'm sure you would have come across the 80-20 rule, which clearly states, which holds good in the cybersecurity space as well, which clearly states that 80% of issues or 80% of attacks can be mitigated by paying attention to the 20% more potential basics or fundamentals. And the fundamentals, the answer to what the fundamental is on your screen. Simple defenses are the best defenses, and the simple things that you can do is to ensure you have a proper patching schedule on place, on-time patching schedule on place, pay attention to vulnerabilities and act on compromised machines right away, implement multi-factor authentication on an organization level, work with better password policy, and do all that you need to do to shore up the basic perimeter of your organization against the more basic cybersecurity attacks. And this is also the answer shared by Jennifer Ayers, who is the Vice President of CrowdStrike after the report was published as part of this particular report on the number of intrusions, the hike in the number of intrusions after the onset of COVID, all right? I am going to give you answers to all this today, but interestingly, talking a bit more about attacks and attacking patterns, I did touch upon how remote desktop attacks drastically increased. And if you do notice, there has been a steep, very, very steep increase in RDP attack dynamics between February to April, more specifically. And this is also the time when all the vulnerabilities in your remote desktop machine or your in your remote desktops or in general your VPN as well was exploited. It's easy to crack into your RDPs more than your VPNs, and we also noticed that this was also the time, you can go back and verify this, between February to April you would have noticed your VPN applications or vendors rolling out multiple patches that are important and critical for you to safeguard your organization. Which brings me to a very interesting question that I have for all of you. How long do you think it takes to detect a cybersecurity intrusion or attack that your organization has been susceptible to or your organization has been prey to? Do let me know your answers in the chat box. I'm going to give you the exact answer in a couple of minutes, but I do want to know how long you think it takes to try and identify a cybersecurity intrusion or attack. And once again, interestingly, this attack dynamics is going to continue. You're going to see this over the next couple of slides. The reason I wanted to talk about the remote the remote work infrastructure and ransomware before talking about the predictions of 2021 is to let you know that history is going to repeat itself. We are going to see these patterns come back and again in 2021 as well, in terms of, you know, the type of attacks and the way attacks happen across the globe. But yes, I'm also going to give you solutions to that. I have a number from Satyanarayanan, thank you so much, that says some attacks may take more than 200 days to detect, and that is perfect, right? The average time it takes to detect an attack is anywhere between 2 months. And trust me when I say this, 2 months to 6 months. It takes 2 months, nearly 60 days for you to even know that you have been attacked. And that is the level of security we have. And this is a global average. I'm not addressing, you know, very specific countries or very specific organizations. I'm talking about the global average. It takes anywhere between 60 days to 6 months to detect a potential cybersecurity attack or intrusion. And when the situation is, you know, likely that we might have been attacked 2 months back and we still don't know about it, we still don't have knowledge about it, the best defense that you can have in place is to ensure that all your basic perimeters are shored up, to ensure you have the right person logging into the right machine at the right time. I'm also going to talk about how attacks have evolved over 2020. And I also have interesting ransomware reports to share with all of you. So moving on. Thank you so much, Satya. Moving on. Yes, interesting how ransomware has evolved from a business risk to a raging national security risk. Please let me know your comments on this particular slide before I give you answers. I want to know what you think about it. Do you think ransomware-based attacks is now a national security risk? You can also think about it from, you know, depending on the country you're checking in from, because things are different in different parts of the world. Some countries are more prone to cybersecurity attacks. Some countries have better defenses because of, you know, the organizational level defenses in place, or even the geographical mandates and defenses in place. So let me know what you think in your personal opinion. Do you think ransomware has moved from being a business risk to a national security? But that said, I'm going to talk about a ransomware attacking style or pattern that became more predominant in 2020 and is expected to, you know, be very, very common in 2021 as well. Once again, this is also why we need to be, you know, wary of what's happening in our environment. And it's not just about ransom. It could also be malware. It could also be, you know, a cyber intrusion where there is data theft, there are data leaks with absolutely with money not being the motivator, and that's the point I will be getting to. But interestingly, double extortion is one of the most recent technologies that have come up in terms of you know, the type of ransomware attacks. It's called ransomware 2.0 as well. And what double extortion basically means is that an intruder tries to steal data from your organization and demands a ransom, threatening the data would be leaked, all right? But what the attacker or intruder also does is they choose to decrypt files that are already present within your organization. They basically encrypt files already present in your organization without you even being able to detect them. So how things get worse, or why this is called double extortion, is because one, you already pay a ransom to prevent a data leak, which you have no certainty about, because even after paying the ransom, your data could potentially leak. But secondly, they choose to, you know, come back and demand for more ransom, which is why it's called double extortion, where they promise you to decrypt the files if and only if you have paid the ransom, which means you are falling prey to one ransomware attack, not once, but twice, right? And this is an attacking trend that have gotten a lot more frequent in 2020. In fact, there are ransomware attack groups that have been identified, and this double extortion ransomware double extortion type of ransomware, type of attack happened only, was done only by one group in 2019, but more than 15 groups attempted the same in 2020, and it is expected to become more, which is definitely a national security risk. This is where I'm going to head to right now, all right? And yes, oh yes, I have a very interesting information from Satya, and Satya says, there are reports of state-sponsored hackers controlling critical assets of other nations, and that is absolutely true. And I'm also going to, let's go have a throwback to 2020 and try and see where we started and where we are right now. And the reason why I've highlighted just these two is because I want to look at this as, right before the lockdown or right before the pandemic hit us full-fledged. So this is a very interesting report, very interesting information shared during a conference by Weinert. Weinert is the identity security director of Microsoft. And Weinert mentioned that the cloud users, the enterprise cloud users, have only 11% adoption of MFA, which means there are close to 90% of users that have not enabled the most effective tool. And I want you to pay attention to that. The most effective tool against cyber threats within the organization. All right. Once again, 2020 March, the FBI, this is more specific to the United States of America, the FBI cyber division released a PIN. All right. And the report also stated that IT administrators should take advantage of all the protection tools like MFA to better defend against cybersecurity targets. And things escalated very quickly after March 2020 because there was a 300% increase in cybersecurity attacks or cybersecurity crimes, which was stated by FBI in or around April, right? VPN-based attacks increased, and it contributed to nearly 60% ransomware attacks that happened in the first 8 months of 2020, which means 60% of ransomware attacks that happened in the first 8 months until August of 2020 targeted your remote desktops and your VPN connection, right? They made use of the vulnerabilities that you were aware of and you were trying to fix in your organization. Once again, this brings me to a very interesting fact that during that period of time, your organization or mine could have been under a potential cybersecurity intrusion, and we might have detected it. We might have had the right security posture in place to prevent it, or the worst, we are yet to find out if we were scapegoats to the 2020 cyber intrusions. All right, and this is ground reality, which brings me to more information that I want to share with you, because ransomware, malware, or any kind of cybersecurity threat does not, does not rule out anybody, no matter what part of the globe that they come from. World Health Organization declared that they have been, they have been susceptible to cybersecurity crimes or cybersecurity attacks, and this is more specifically phishing scams. All right, so World Health Organization phishing scams were huge in the month of April, and that's just a very small example because CDC in the US was also attacked during the same period of time. The NHS in UK was also declared that they were prey to phishing scams in 2020 May. All right, we all know about the infamous Twitter attack, and interestingly, this user credential that was compromised, this Twitter user credential that was compromised in July 2020 was of a user whose identities were, compromised because of remote desktop vulnerabilities. I just want to quickly put that across. All right. Once again, no part of the world was left out. The New Zealand Stock Exchange was compromised. The Japan telecommunication company was compromised. We know a lot of cases that have happened regionally as well. Cognizant, was compromised in the US, the Californian airport. I'm just naming all the attacks that happened in 2020 from the top of my head. We also know cases of a lot more cyber threats that UK was susceptible to. A lot of healthcare industries, in fact, Reddy's laboratories in India was also compromised and declared that they had data that was stolen, right? Interestingly, this all comes down to giants towards the end of the year, where Microsoft was compromised because of a huge ransomware in November. I believe that the data was also leaked, right? Microsoft's data was leaked in November, and once again, SolarWinds data was leaked in December. But the reason I've highlighted this in red is also, pointing back to a very interesting thing that Satya shared with all of us. And that is, with these two attacks that happened between November and December, very critical government information was stolen and also leaked, or, the SolarWinds, part of the SolarWinds attack was also a ransomware attempt. So it was threatened to be leaked for a ransom. And this is where ransomware, from being, a simple phishing scam or a simple user identity compromise, it's not simple, but this is where it started. This is where the evolution of ransomware was in mid 2020 with the onset of COVID, user identity being compromised for cryptocurrency, messages that were dropped out, public figures were used in the Twitter attack, the New Zealand Stock Exchange. So you see how these threats or the attacking pattern is constantly evolving to becoming more and more dangerous, where finally the low in December 2020 was when government information was susceptible to compromise. The data was susceptible to be leaked. And this also affected multiple other organizations, including Cisco, including Microsoft, and many others who are yet to declare if their data or their information was also stolen, all right? The reason why I listed down all these attacks that have happened over 2020 is to once again give you a reality check that ransomware is definitely evolving to be a global security threat. But more importantly, we also have to be cognizant of the fact that there are things that you can do to safeguard user identities. There are things that you can do to not fall prey to ransomware. There are things that you can do to shore up your perimeter with good network security defenses. And that is also something that I will be touching upon today. That said, coming back, sorry about that. That said, coming back to talk a bit more about, how it has evolved to become a global security threat or a national security threat is, interestingly, January 2021, the US Department of Homeland Security has declared ransomware as a national security threat in the United States of America, and also been given #1 priority to defend data, critical data, from being leaked. And that is where we have been pushed to right now. All right, and this is just a small example of ransomware being a threat, a national security threat, more specifically talking about the United States. I'm sure across the globe we can, pick many cases of data compromise, many cases of data leaks, ransomware demands, irrespective of what country we all come from, right? And it's important for us as a global audience, as cybersecurity specialists, to know what we are expecting in 2020, to try and understand the top 5 cybersecurity predictions for 2020 and make sure that we have all the right defenses in place. And that is what today's session intends to talk about, all right? #1 prediction is that chief information security officers will see convergence across solutions. Integration is critical. It's going to make a lot of change and is definitely going to improve efficiency across different applications that you work with. And that is also one of the predictions for 2021. When I say CSIOs will see convergence across solutions, I'm talking about having multiple solutions that work well, in great synergy. It could be a network security solution, it could be an endpoint security solution, your identity and access management, your messaging security, your help desk, everything coming together and working in great synergy to overall safeguard your organization, protect your organization, is something CISOs will be seeking this particular year. We also know for a fact that multi-factor authentication services need to be mandated for remote desktop access. And just out of curiosity, do let me know which part of the world you're checking in from today. And if you are still working remotely, this question is more out of curiosity because, I want to try and understand how the situation is in the other parts of the world. So take a couple of seconds to let me know in the chat box. I'm checking in from India, and we are going through some brutal phase right now where, there's a second wave of COVID striking us, and a few states are planning to go under lockdown once again. But that said, we're all continuing to work remotely for, the majority part of my organization at least is working remotely. I've been checking in from home for over a year right now. And it's important for me to ensure that I have all the right defenses in place when I, log in online, access my applications, access my machine, try and get access to my network, to servers within my organization to ensure that my credentials are not compromised. And, I know this because I work with, or in the cybersecurity space, I talk about user identity and security, but it's important to also educate users in your organization, every single one of them, to simply make them aware of what kind of access they have, how their access works, and, talk to them more about how authentication works and why it needs to be secure. That would be a great step. And that is important because remote employees will continue to be the target for cybersecurity attacks, all right? This is not surprising. And that's what's very interesting about 2021, because the top 5 cybersecurity predictions for 2021 looks like history is going to be repeating itself. Many of you checking in from different domains that you work with, you could be IT specialists, administrators, information security officers. You could play different roles in your organization, different critical roles in your organization. But what's important is that every single one of us have taken it upon ourselves to safeguard user identity, to safeguard the organization. And I'm sure you're with me when I say this, right? So when COVID hit us, when mass remote working, hit us, when our countries and our organizations had to shut down and go under lockdown, we were working 24/7 to ensure that everything was running smoothly, the user experience was not compromised, but at the same time, ensuring all the right perimeters are up and running, data is not stolen, or data thefts don't happen, our users' credentials is not easily compromised, all right? And there were patching happening continuously. We were updating our security policies. We were introducing authenticators. And I would say a great job on that, but we have to continue doing so. Keep a constant alert profile up and running on an organizational level across different departments that you're coming from. Educate your fellow colleagues as well, because remote employees will be targets for cybersecurity attacks. And the sad news is that 46% of cybersecurity attacks that happened in 2020 targeted users' mobile devices. So as much as we like to be on top of our security game to, ensure that we have all the advanced security measures taken, all the right reporting and monitoring happening, I also want to remind you of the ground reality that intruders or hackers are also constantly working to up their game, to be in the top of their game, which means it's going to be easier for them to break into home networks. It's going to be easier for them to target remote employees. And we need to ensure that we have all the levels of authentication that are critical and necessary. We also have to ensure that, access to unsecure VPN, access to remote desktop that are not necessary for certain users need to be revoked, need to be worked on, attend to vulnerabilities, act on a good patching schedule, all right? And also, we all know for a fact that ransomware attacks are likely to more intensify with remote working continuing to be the new normal. Interestingly, the spike in cybersecurity attacks, the annual spike in cybersecurity attacks is between 300 to 400% every year. And with 2020, the number has just gone higher. And it's important for us to know what is coming and act on what we already know. And that's something that I talk about in most of my sessions. A lot of things that we need to do to secure the perimeter of our organization are basic, are things that we are well aware of, but we're not taking the time to act on it. All right. One very interesting, question that I have for all of you, just to try and understand how things are in your organization. What level of multi-factor authentication have you enabled for users in your organization? Have you enabled multi-factor authentication across all systems and applications? Do you have it for your endpoints? Have you enabled it for your VPN? Do you have it for certain applications like Office 365? Or have you selectively enabled for critical user accounts like administrators and certain privileged accounts? Do let me know by dropping in your messages in the chat box. I'm going to take time to answer a couple of questions. If you do have any, please keep them coming. We have people checking in from Ukraine. We have people checking in from Israel. And Amit wants to share with us that their organization is constantly upgrading security measures. Most of their employees are still working from home, and they're also transferring to a zero trust policy across employees and customers. That is fantastic, Amit. And that also brings me to a very interesting slide right here, where the focus in the next 12 months, and when I say the next 12 months, I'm also talking about almost all of 2020, is going to be around network security, endpoint security, identity and access management, and messaging security. But more importantly, the point that I want you to notice here, this is the McKenzie report that came out in 2021, right? That came out in September 2020. And the most important part here is that small and medium-sized businesses are also going to be susceptible to cybersecurity intrusions and attacks. It is not just the big names, it's not just the legacy enterprises. All of these businesses, your SMOs, are also going to be susceptible to cybersecurity intrusions. In fact, interestingly, 34% of attacks that happened last year targeted SMOs. So it's important for every single business and organization out there to pay attention to your network, your endpoints, and your identity and access. Also pay attention to, messaging security, your services, web security, data protection, also work with compliance mandates, also work with risk management. Basically pay attention to your fundamental security posture across your network, endpoint, and user identity management. But that also brings me to another interesting slide. Like I said, 2020 might repeat itself in 2021. It's just going to be, much higher, right, in terms of intensity. But 2020's lessons is going to help us with the 2021's defense. And trust me when I say this, work on a zero trust policy. Like Amit rightly pointed out, it's important to work with the principle of least privilege to enable multi-factor authentication across different systems, provide access to specific users based on policies, based on groups, based on roles, and provide just-in-time access. Control where users log in from, control who has access to what, when, where, how, keep a tab on all these, and also focus on endpoint security. Ensure that users who are logging into their desktops, their mobile devices, their VPN networks do so securely with not one, not two, but minimum of 3 factors of authentication. It could be the password, which is the first layer of defense. The second layer of defense definitely could be a secure code sent to their mobile app, a secure code or scan that is done by their mobile app or their email account. And finally, you can also work with biometrics, which will nearly prevent 99.99% of cybersecurity attacks. And this is not a number that I'm throwing at you randomly. This number was disclosed by Microsoft. With multi-factor authentication in place, you can prevent 99.99% of cybersecurity attacks in your cloud infrastructure, your enterprise cloud infrastructure. And it's important, even if you work with the hybrid setup, even if you have an on-premises setup in place, make sure you have the right backup and recovery plan. Encrypt your files, make sure that you have a backup and recovery plan. So even when the worst hits, even when your data has been lost, even if your data has been stolen, you have the backup that you can make use of, that you can recover and kickstart your operations without affecting your business. Also focus on an artificial intelligence and machine learning convergent identity and access management. This seems like a lot, but trust me when I say this, all this takes barely a couple of days to implement on an organization level. So more out of curiosity, how many of you are already here? Do let me know, give me a number. I have about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 points that you see on the screen. Let me know what's your score out of 6. How many of these have you checked on your organization level? Is it 3? Is it 5? Have you checked all 6? Let me know by dropping in your messages in the chat box. But that said, I'm very quickly going to talk about AD360, which is our in-house identity and access management, which will help you, identity and access management solution, which will help you address these concerns. So when I speak about endpoint security with multi-factor authentication, safeguard your endpoints. So when I, as an end user, try to, get access to my network on a business holiday, it's not a working day here in India, and I'm trying to check in, I have red flags that are alerted, right? But more importantly, I can get access to my network only and only if I verify my identity for the second time. When I choose to bypass this, I do not have access. I need to verify my identity. The same holds good for applications as well. When I try to log into, my G Suite as an end user, I'm working with test accounts today, so don't worry if I'm displaying passwords. When I try to log into user accounts today, trying to get access to applications, multiple applications that I work with. Let me quickly key in the password for Adam. I cannot simply get access to G Suite, Office 365, or any application that I'm working with, or any endpoint that I'm working with. I need to go through multi-factor authentication, or a minimum of 2 factors of authentication. In this particular case, I'm going to verify my identity with security questions. Once again, this is a very simple, straightforward example that I wanted to walk you through to show you how simple this is, and yet can safeguard multiple applications, multiple user credentials from being compromised, safeguard your endpoints as well. All right. So when I try to attempt to log into G Suite, I can use 2-factor authentication to verify my identity before I get access to Adam's Google account. Right there, I have a welcome Adam message. And this holds good for your Windows, Mac, your Linux systems. It holds good for your VPN as well. Interestingly, it's also important for you to revisit your password practices, especially if you still work with Active Directory, because the Active Directory password policy that we're talking about is nearly 2 decades old. It's important for you to step up your password game and ensure users do not have predictable patterns and passwords, and this will save users and their credentials from a huge list of brute force attacks, a huge list of pattern-based attacks, dictionary attacks, incremental password-based attacks, password history-based attacks. Work with longer passwords, enforce better password policy, and ensure that users work seamlessly while trying to get access to their machine with better password practices. All right. Introduce conditional access. If you have a user group that is restricted to a certain geographical location, if you work only for stipulated business hours, if you have device-based access control or want to provide IP-based access control, there is no better time but now to achieve all this with AD Self-Service Plus. Introduce conditional access for users in your organization, and when there is a red flag, users will be denied access to their endpoints, denied access to their single sign-on applications, or even to perform password self-service operation. You can keep a lot of intrusions at bay with conditional access, and it's critical, especially for a remote working infrastructure. That said, it's also important to have the right backup and recovery tools in place. Make sure that your hybrid environment, your Exchange online mailboxes, your SharePoint, your OneDrive, your data, at the end of the day is backed up and you can recover it at any point of time. Make sure this data is also encrypted so there is no compromise that can easily affect you when it hits you, right? So this is a great way to be ahead of a potential ransomware attack. Also highly, highly recommended. And like I said, most ransomware attacks can be prevented with proper encryption in place and with good backup and recovery system in place. You do not have to be, you do not have to fall prey to these attacks as well. And finally, the last point that I do want to talk about today is a machine learning and AI-driven approach to cybersecurity. We all have to come to terms with the fact that, machine learning and artificial intelligence is the future, and it's also going to be extremely relevant in 2020 when it comes to coping up with potential cyber intrusions. And you can make the best use of artificial intelligence, narrow down the gap between the cybersecurity expectations and what your organization can meet by creating alerts. Let the application throw errors or shoot alerts at things that are anomalous, things that are unusual, things that are not normal, all right, and keep a tab on all that's happening with extensive auditing across your hybrid infrastructure. That said, once again, this is something that I hear time and again. The biggest problem with multi-factor authentication is multiple services and different methods, all right? Working with multiple applications and codes definitely creates a big mess. Does AD Self-Service Plus support pop-up message verification on phones? Amit, the good news is yes, it does. You can choose to send out a pop-up notification to AD Self-Service Plus mobile app that the users can make use of. But that said, when I speak about multi-factor authentication, you can selectively pick authenticators that work for users and also customize different authenticators for different user groups. All right, one simple authenticator that has worked really well for users in my organization is a simple, straightforward fingerprint scan or a fingerprint authentication. It takes less than a few seconds, barely a second to scan your fingerprint, but it also is a great method of user identity verification because I am the only one who processes my fingerprint. So you can work with technology that is comfortable for users in your organization. And to answer your question, yes, it definitely does. AD Self-Service Plus does support pop-up message verification sent securely to the AD Self-Service Plus mobile app. And this is what we call as push notification. Thank you so much. If you do have more questions, please keep them coming. I'm trying to keep the session more towards a problem solution approach. I'm not dwelling deep into the configuration side of things because I'm talking about multiple applications and multiple modules across AD 360, but also to the administrators who've joined us today. These are some tips and tricks that I wanted to pass on to all of you. You can implement an account lockout policy that differentiates user logon from hackers, especially during password login and password reset, to tackle these brute force attacks, to have the right security measures in place. You can also choose to disable RDP. Highly recommend disable RDP unless the service is, ultimately called for. Give access only to the right people. Work with the principle of least privilege, even if you're working with, critical accounts, privileged accounts, working with administrative accounts. Only certain users require access to certain things. Let's work with the fundamental concept of least privilege. Work with the concept of zero trust, where you need to verify user identity before getting access. You control the level of access, you control the type of access, and also control the level of information that is provided to users in your organization, and users as well as administrative team as well. Have a great patching schedule in place. Install patches right away for affected machines and as quickly as possible. This is critical. Keep a tab on your infrastructure, all right? Keep a tab and create alerts, customize reports, and monitor your environment periodically, and don't be susceptible to potential cybersecurity intrusions and identify them after 200, 300, 400 days. It's important for us to keep a tab on what's happening in our environment. And, red flags are easy as long as you have the right alerts in place. Have an AI and ML convergent IAM deployed in your organization. You can also enable network level authentication for your RDP, and that is something that you can do with your native tool in AD. And these are some tips that I quickly wanted to pass on before I wrap up this session. That said, I did speak about different modules from AD 360, which is our in-house consolidated identity and access management. You can make use of AD Self-Service Plus to enable multi-factor authentication for endpoints. You can control access to information with AD Manager Plus, and also work with the fundamental principle of zero trust in terms of access control. You can have a backup and recovery in place with the help of Recovery Manager Plus. You can keep a tab on the identity lifecycle management with AD Manager Plus. Work with real-time auditing of your complete hybrid infrastructure with AD Audit Plus. You can also introduce single sign-on and password synchronization, monitor your Exchange environment, monitor your M365 environment, and do much more with AD 360. So if you require any information, any further information about our in-house application, please feel free to write to me and I'd be more than happy to help you with all the information to the best of my knowledge. Before you check out of today's session, I humbly request you to drop in your feedback on the session feedback form that is on your screen. Do let me know if the session was informative. If you also have any comments, ideas, suggestion, criticism, feel free to drop in your messages in the chat box provided. It means a lot to me to read your messages and get a feedback from you. You can also write to me at chard@manageengine.com. I'd be more than happy to assist you at any point of time with all the information that I have that you require that will help you have the right security posture in your organization, that will help you defend your organization from potential cybersecurity intrusion, and also help you with personalized demonstration of our in-house applications. Before I wrap up today's session and check out for the day, I want to quickly put this thought across. I wish, hope, and pray you, your friends, your family, your near and dear are blessed with great health and happiness. I also hope that we come out of this pandemic as better, happier, healthier individuals real soon. Please take great care of yourself, and I'm looking forward to seeing you all in the upcoming sessions in the near future, and hopefully when things settle down in your country or mine. Until then, to all of you who have joined me today, I'm wishing you a very happy new year if you come from the eastern part of the world, and also my heartfelt from down wishes to all of you. Thank you so much. Namaste.